Welcome to this demonstration of ArchivesSpace and overview of ArchivesSpace member benefits. I'm Jessica Crouch, the Community Engagement Lead for ArchivesSpace, and I'm joined today by ArchivesSpace Lead Program Manager Christine DeBella and ArchivesSpace Program Assistant Bailey Grace Harrell. This session is intended for people considering using ArchivesSpace. If you're already an ArchivesSpace member, this presentation will probably not offer any new information, but you're more than welcome to attend. I'll begin by giving a brief overview of the ArchivesSpace program before moving to a light demonstration of the application itself. After, I'll provide information about ArchivesSpace membership and the benefits of being a member, not just a user of ArchivesSpace. We're using the latest version of ArchivesSpace for this demo, which is version 4.1.1. We won't be able to troubleshoot issues with your own implementations of ArchivesSpace, and we'll be focusing this demonstration on using the ArchivesSpace staff user interface and very lightly the public user interface. If you have a question or issue with your own implementation, please email us at archivespacehome@lyrasis.org, and that email address will be shared many times throughout the session. This session is being recorded, and all presentation slides and links will be made available with the recording. So, what is ArchivesSpace? ArchivesSpace is an open source content management system used by archivists in a variety of settings to manage and describe their collections, and optionally make those collections publicly available through our public user interface. ArchivesSpace supports a range of functions performed in archives and special collections, including accessioning, arrangement, description, preservation, and access, and allows archivists to describe a variety of materials, including both physical items and digital objects, including born digital material. ArchivesSpace can also be used as a metadata authoring tool and supports both importing and exporting data in a variety of formats. ArchivesSpace is the successor to two widely used open source applications, Archivist Toolkit and Archon. We know many archives continue to use these two systems, and we do have migration tools available on our website for those users looking to migrate to ArchivesSpace from those legacy systems. But we also know that users are migrating to ArchivesSpace from a variety of content management systems. In addition to standard and metadata-specific imports available within the application, we do maintain a number of migration tools and data maps that can help make migration into ArchivesSpace easier for those looking to migrate from another system. So, in short, ArchivesSpace is developed by archivists, supported by diverse archival repositories, and fills a common need for archives around the world. While the ArchivesSpace application is free to download and use, ArchivesSpace is a nonprofit organization, and we have a membership model to support the development of the application and user community. Only organizations that are members of ArchivesSpace directly contribute to the sustainability of the application, and because of that support, members of ArchivesSpace are entitled to certain tangible benefits. I'm going to get into those after the demo. But in addition to these benefits, members also serve on the various governance groups within ArchivesSpace, including our User Advisory Council, Technical Advisory Council, and our board. Members are also asked to participate in community discussions and polls about the future development of the application. In this way, ArchivesSpace members work together to create and improve an archives management application reflecting our values as archivists. That means ArchivesSpace is standards-driven, flexible and extensible, customizable and localizable, integrates with other applications people use to do their work, and promotes efficiency overall. And ArchivesSpace is and provides an opportunity for archivists to manage and make available as much archival material as possible, no matter their institutional setting. We have ArchivesSpace members working in large government archives and major academic institutions, as well as small community archives and volunteer-driven historical societies making use of the application. This is because ArchivesSpace promotes adoption of standards and develops shared best practices across all of these organizations, and brings people from different sizes and types of institutions together to solve common problems we all share. ArchivesSpace also provides the opportunity to take all of your work, all of this archival description, and make it available to users via a public user interface, which we're going to see a little bit later. So with that, I'm going to move over to the ArchivesSpace application and to the demonstration. Okay, so you now should be seeing an ArchivesSpace, the staff user interface of ArchivesSpace. So if we're not seeing that, someone please let me know. In this demonstration, I'll spend most of our time exploring the ArchivesSpace staff user interface, which is where we are right now. This is where archivists and those working to describe material will also be spending most of their time. And then after, I'll move to the ArchivesSpace public user interface to very briefly show you what that looks like for researchers and patrons. But of course, we're going to be looking at the out-of-the-box public user interface. You're going to want to customize it to look a little bit more like you would want it to look at your organization. And before I dive into the demo, I want to mention that all of the examples we're using today are real collections held by ArchivesSpace member organizations. These organizations made their metadata available to the program for the purposes of education and training, and in the interest of creating a more diverse set of example data for users. We're very grateful to these organizations for their willingness to share their data in this way. So let's go ahead and look at ArchivesSpace. I'm going to minimize my screen since I'm going to be moving around. So I'm not going to be able to see if anything is coming into the chat. So if I need to be alerted to something, please let me know, Christine or Bailey Grace. So like I said, this is the staff user interface for ArchivesSpace. I'm going to be moving really quickly through this. And when you're looking at this, you may be thinking, well, there's not much there, but from here, you can really invoke all of the functions that you need to use ArchivesSpace on the staff side. So this is where, as an archivist, you'll be spending most of your time. We do say that this landing page is divided up into 4 zones. We really only say that for the purposes of training and demos, but it works for this. So the first zone that we're going to look at is here up in the upper right corner. There's a little rectangle. This is the repository and application management section. This is where you can go to invoke some really high level functions within the application. So the first thing you see here is the select repository dropdown. Within ArchivesSpace, you have the ability to have multiple repositories within one instance of ArchivesSpace. You may not need that. You may only need one repository. You have your ArchivesSpace you're working in, that's fine. But maybe you're an organization that has multiple departments, and each department wants to have their own repository that manages their own records their way with staff with certain levels of permission. You can have multiple repositories and set permissions for that example. Or maybe you're an organization that is sharing your ArchivesSpace implementation with other organizations, and so you don't want those organizations going into your records and vice versa. So you can divide those through repositories. So when you are working within ArchivesSpace, if you are at an organization that has multiple repositories within an instance, this is where you can navigate between them if you have the permissions that allow you to do that. Not everyone is going to need to have those permissions. Some people only need to work in their specific repository. And if that's the case for their permission type, they wouldn't be able to navigate. But for the purposes of this demo, we have admin level permissions, and we can move and do whatever we need to do during this demo. So you want to always make sure that you're working within the repository that you want to be in, which we are, but that's where you can do that here. Next to that, you see we have a little system drop down. If you click that, again, these are really high level functions that you will not need to do every day at your organization. They're also not things that every single person using ArchivesSpace at your organization will need to do. So because we have permissions, we can see all of this. If you have a user that does not have permissions set to be able to access and edit any of this information, they actually wouldn't even see these options. They would just see at the very bottom this ArchivesSpace Help Center link. And if you click that, that takes you out to the ArchivesSpace Help Center. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but the Help Center is where we have the ArchivesSpace user manual, as well as our user tutorial videos and recordings of all of our past trainings. That is a benefit of membership to ArchivesSpace. So if you are at a ArchivesSpace member organization, you can click that, go out to the Help Center, and review all of that documentation and access the user manual there. If you are not from an ArchivesSpace member organization, if you click that, it will take you to the page, but it will say that access is denied. If you're at a member organization and it says access denied, that just means that you need to log in. So make sure that you have logged in, created a Help Center account and are able to access that information. The rest of these functions, we're not going to go into them really at all. Just know that this is where you can do those things like managing your control values. So your drop-down list, you can manage the values within those drop-down lists. You can manage location and container profiles. So things around space management, you can do that here. You can manage your repository. So if you need to create a new repository or edit the information about a repository that already exists, like you get a new phone number or something, you can do that here. You can manage your OAI PMH settings here, and you can also manage users. So not everyone's going to have the ability to do all of this. Specifically, not everyone's going to have the ability to manage users, but this is where you would need to go to create your new users, get them ready to set them up with their permissions. And I'll show you where you can create those permission groups in just a second. You also can view your system information here. So if you're not your sysadmin, you don't have the ability to go into the back end of ArchivesSpace, but you are curious about that information, you can find that here. There's not much you can actually do with it. It's not really actionable, but it is good for your information. And then next to that, this little rectangle admin, that's your user account. So right now we're logged into an admin account. Whatever your name would be there, it would say that, so you know who you're logged in as. If you click that, it would take you to the relevant information about your account, and you can make changes if you needed to. and then the arrow here. This takes you to the preference management. Again, these would be dependent on the level of permissions that you have. If you're an administrator, you are able to set global preferences for the entire ArchivesSpace implementation. If you have a lower level of permissions, but still pretty high level access, you would be able to set repository preferences. And then the default preferences are for individual personal preference. We don't have time to go into that today, but your preference management would be like, if you want to make sure that within your search and browse screens, the columns of results that are displayed, you want to have certain types of data in those columns, you could set those within preferences. Or if you're a user who would prefer to interact with the application in Spanish, but everyone else is interacting with it in English, you could change it so that your ArchivesSpace, your specific view of ArchivesSpace would be in the language of your preference. There's a lot you can do within preferences, but that's where you would invoke all of those functions. They have sort of the relationship with each other is basically if an admin goes in and sets a global preference, but you as the user set a separate preference, your individual preferences would they would be preferenced over the global preferences. So whatever changes you make would take effect over any global or repository preferences. If you have the admin ability to become a user, you could do that here as well. Super handy if you have someone who's like, I'm not seeing what you're seeing, or I'm not able to do what you're asking me to do. You could go in and say like, oh, okay, you need to have a different level of permission. You can go in and sort of check to see that what they're saying is what's actually happening. And then you can manage your personal user account and log out here as well. So again, all really high level stuff there related to like the repository and the application management. Under that, we have an area of the application that is still very high level, but it gets into things like user permissions and background jobs. This, just like this is your name, your screen name, this is the abbreviation for the repository that you're working in. So again, always let you know what repository you're in. And then next to that, we have the gear dropdown. So when you select this, again, high level stuff we're not going to have time to go into, but this is where you would go and manage your user groups, so your permission groups, and then the user access within those permission groups for your users. So that's where you would do that. You also have the ability to, if you're using ArchivesSpace's assessment module to assess your materials, you can manage those assessment attributes, manage your top containers, so like your boxes or the containers that your stuff lives in. If you need to do some things in bulk there, like maybe clean up your orphan containers that aren't associated with any records, or add a bunch of barcodes, you could do that there. You could transfer a repository. You're going to do that rarely or never, but if two departments merge or something like that, you could do that here. Not something you're going to do very often. And then you also could run background jobs from here. This is one of two places where you can invoke background jobs, but a background job would be something like if you needed to import data through one of our import templates, generate a PDF, something like that, you would do that here. And then speaking of import templates, if you want to make use of our bulk import templates, which allows you to ingest information in bulk, obviously, instead of having to create records one at a time within the application, you can find those templates here. So you just need to access the template that you need for the information you're trying to import, download it, fill it out with everything you need to fill out, and then import it into ArchivesSpace. And you can find those right there. You also can run reports from the section. So we have some canned reports, just sort of like really simple reports that you can use, or we also have a custom report functionality that would allow you to create a more specific report for your needs, and you could save that as a template in case you need to run it again and again. I will say that specifically for reports and really anything we're looking at today, if you're interested in this and learning more, I would recommend going to our website and testing it out in our sandbox. You can find that on the Getting Started page of our website. Just to see if it works for you and you can actually get at the information you're trying to get at. The sandbox is a great place just to test things out before you commit to using ArchivesSpace. And then finally, if you have any plugins, you can invoke those plugins here as well. ArchivesSpace comes with one plugin installed out of the box. That's the Library of Congress name authority file import plugin. So if you want to import subjects, like subject headings and name authority files, you can do that from here. That's not the only way you can ingest in subject and agent records by any means, and you don't have to use the Library of Congress as your thesaurus for those things. You have a lot of flexibility within ArchivesSpace for that. But that plugin it does come out of the box just to make your life a little bit easier if you do want to use that. The third area that I'll mention very briefly is the ability to search. So most users are just going to use the basic keyword search, right? That's what we're all very familiar with. get a search, and then you're able to either, I mean, hopefully your search would be a little more specific than just the word papers, and you would get the results that you needed. But if you weren't getting the results that you needed, you also have the ability to facet your search. So there's different facets on the left-hand side, or even filter by text and search within your search results to try to narrow down those results. Or if you want to build out a more complex search, I'm going to go ahead and go home to clean this up a little bit. You can do an advanced search within ArchivesSpace. So you have the ability to build out 3 specific advanced search fields that you can narrow according to, the specific fields and the specific information you're looking for. You can link them with Boolean operators and or not, and is the default. So you can build a complex search there if you need to. All right, and then finally, the thing you're probably most curious about, you have the ability to create records within ArchivesSpace. So the 4th area is the ability to browse and create. Browsing, obviously, you'd be browsing records that already exist within ArchivesSpace, and you would browse by the specific record type you're interested in. And then create, same thing. You'll see that the 2 options, very similar. You can browse records, create records. So these are the different records that you can create within ArchivesSpace. I mentioned earlier that you can invoke background jobs from 2 different places. This is the 2nd place you can do that. You can see that some of the different background jobs that you can run, and you would do that either by going here through the gear menu. But then you'll notice the rest of these are all different types of records that you can create. There's a little line right here. This little line, it kind of designates for you that the 3 primary record types within ArchivesSpace are accession records, resource records, and digital object records. Those are the records that I'm going to show you today. Those are your material description records, right? Those are the records that are about your materials. They are describing your materials. All of the records that you see under those 3 record types, so subjects all the way down to assessments, those are record types that are intended to amplify your accession, resource, and digital object records. You link a related subject record so that you can tie your related materials together. You add locations to your materials because you want to know where that stuff lives, right? You add an event record because something has been processed or maybe has been sent out for conservation. So these records are additive and supplement your accession, resource, and digital object records. You can create them either in the context of those accession, resource, and digital object records, or you can create them right here and have them already like existing and standing alone. So maybe you want to go ahead and build out a whole thesaurus of subject headings that you know that you're going to use, and then they're already there for you just to pull from and link whenever you're processing your collection and creating your resource record. Or maybe you want to go ahead and create all of your locations in a batch so that they exist and you know that you've plotted your space out appropriately. And then when it's time to take that box and put it on a shelf, the location already exists in ArchivesSpace and you can just put it there. So different options for how you want to manage those records, but the records below that line, again, are intended to exist and function in the application as additive and supplement the session, resource, and digital object records. So the last thing, let me look at my notes. Yeah. So before I show you what some finished records look like, one more thing I want to show you, and I'm just going to go to create an accession record. The point that it's not an accession record, that's not the point of it, but I wanted to point out a few other helpful elements about ArchivesSpace. So you see we've created a new record. We now have a blank record template that we can begin to fill out. You can just scroll through and provide the information as you need to. Again, don't worry about looking at all of this right now. It's more about the functionality. Or if you know exactly where you need to drop to in the record, I just want to go add some subjects, you can use the left-hand navigation to drop you right where you need to go. So you'll see me do both throughout the rest of this demo. So if you see me scrolling and I'm going too fast, that's one thing. But if you see me just drop somewhere, you're like, well, how'd you get there? I probably use the left-hand navigation. Also, whenever you're creating a new record within ArchivesSpace, there's a few things to keep in mind. One, if you see a red asterisk, that means it's required. So in order to be able to save that new information or that new record, you do need to make sure that you are supplying information everywhere there is a red asterisk. Just because a field exists does not mean you need to put information there. So for all of these other these other fields that are not required, don't feel like you have to fill the whole thing out, especially for something like an accession record. You just want to make sure that you're providing the information that's relevant to you and your needs and meets your needs. But if there's a red asterisk, that does mean that it is required. Also, something to note is if you open up a subrecord, so let's open up a date. We want to add a date. You notice that before there were no red asterisks, it was collapsed. But now that I've opened it up, there are new red asterisks, there are new requirements. That means that in order to save the record with the date, this new date subrecord open, I would need to supply that information. But let's say that I was like, oh, let me add an extent, and then I think, oh no, I didn't mean to do that. I could just confirm removal, it goes away. I no longer have to supply that was required information. You can just get rid of it. But if it's a red asterisk, it does need to be required. Another thing you may have noticed is, well, there's another asterisk here. There's this gray thing. What does that mean? So that means that is a conditionally required field, which can be kind of confusing. And that's where another really fun piece of ArchivesSpace functionality comes in handy, and that's the rollover tooltips. So if you're ever looking at a label and you're thinking, I don't know what this means, I don't know why this gray asterisk there, you can just roll over the label and you're provided with a tooltip. So for this, the tooltip does let you know that it's conditionally required. It gives you some examples of what could go within this field, and it references DAX, which is the standard. So if there's ever if it's ever like a standard is being applied here, then that information will also be provided in addition to the definition and some examples. So the gray asterisk does mean that something has to go here or something has to go somewhere else. And in the event of dates, what that means is that once you provide the date type, you have the option of either providing a date expression or machine readable begin and end dates. I'm not going to provide any of that. So I'm going to close out, confirm removal, and now I don't have to supply anything. Now, if you're using ArchivesSpace and you're still a little confused about that, or you're confused about dates in general, you're not really sure what to supply there, the last thing I'll point out before I start showing you some completed records is all throughout the application, you'll see these little question marks. These are content-sensitive help links. So we can always get to the ArchivesSpace user manual if you're at an ArchivesSpace member organization by going up to that dropdown I showed you, the system dropdown, and going to the ArchivesSpace Help Center. That will take you to the Help Center. It will take you to the homepage for the Help Center, and you can navigate as you need to. But if you're I just need to understand dates. I'm not interested in seeing anything else in the Help Center. I just want to read the user manual documentation about dates. You can find a content-sensitive help link and just click that. So anywhere you see a question mark, when you click that, it will take you out to the specific page of the user manual that relates to that area of the application. So it's just a great way to get additional context, additional information when you're using the application and maybe just need like that specific bit of help in that moment. You're not interested in reading the whole user manual, right? So if you're an ArchivesSpace member, you can access it that way. All right. So with that, make sure I covered everything in my notes. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and show you an accession record and then a few resource and digital object records. I'm going to move quickly because I also do want to show you the public user interface and still lots more to cover. But I'm going to move over to the next tab, which is a completed accession record. So it's like, this is the roasted chicken on like Julia Childs is now showing you the finished product that I'm pulling out of the oven. So this is an accession record, a completed, saved accession record. It's the Krispy Kreme corporate records. So, you know, I kind of want a donut right now. But this, you can see this has been saved. It has all of the information that's necessary, the required information, as well as additional information, right? Like you're going to want to include more than just the identifier and the date for an accession record, and you can do that here. So accession records store information about the receipt of materials, which are typically unprocessed. You're normally going to be completing an accession record when you're getting new information, right? But an accession record can be for a single item or an aggregation of materials. Here it's for a full collection. It can represent the acquisition of a new resource, or it could be an accrual for an existing resource. So maybe this is you work in a college archive, and this is just the annual accrual from the Office of the Provost. So it's a new accession, but it's an addition to an existing collection. An accession record must record the accession identifier and the date, and it needs to include, or it doesn't need to, but you're going to want to include much more descriptive information like the title, the content and condition descriptions. You might want to include an inventory or a box list, the information that you need to make your life easier when it comes time to process the collection. And then accession records can be linked to other types of ArchivesSpace records, like existing resource records or digital object records, or maybe another accession record, right? Like if it is from the Office of the Provost, you might want to link the accession records that already exist as well. And then you can link related subjects and agents if you need to do that as well. So you can see all of this information. Anywhere you see a dark blue, by the way, so this is these are agent links. So this is the creator of the collection is the Krispy Kreme Donut Corporation. Anywhere you see a dark blue like this, or here's a related resource, that dark blue lets you know that this is a different record. This is another record. You could click on that and view that related resource record, or you could click on that and view that related person. So that lets you know there's another record there that is independent of this accession record, but is linked to it that you can look at and review and make any changes that you need to. So that's an accession record. You do not need to use accession records to then process your collection and create resource records. That is not a requirement. However, to make your life easier, ArchivesSpace does have what we call spawning functionality, which you'll see here. This just auto-populates some of the information from your accession record into a new record template that you can then finish and save. So it means that you're not having to duplicate things like your title and like your content description and that sort of thing. It does not take all of the information over because the fields in an accession record are not like one-to-one exactly the same for a resource record, but it does help give you that little bit of a jump start so you're not having to copy paste or duplicate a lot of effort. So you can use spawning functionality within an accession record to spawn a new accession record. So again, that Office of the Provost example, if you need to, you got this year's accrual, you can go into last year's and spawn it so that you're not having to like copy that stuff that you just have to copy over every single year. Or if it's time to process this collection, you can go ahead and create a resource record, spawn a resource record, and some of that additional basic information will be populated again. So you're not having to do copy paste or maybe make an error and things don't get copied over exactly right. Or you could also copy or spawn an archival object record. So that is an archival object record is a child record of a resource record. So within a finding aid, which is what a resource record is, or a catalog, which is a resource record is, it's like a series within it or an item or a file, one of those nested child records in the hierarchy. So again, going back to the Office of the Provost or example, maybe you have one whole collection that's the Office of the Provost, and then the year 2025 will be its own series. You can create an archival object record for this new accession and nest it already within that existing resource record. So just makes your life easier. You do not have to use it. Like I said, you do not have to create an accession record to create a resource record or a digital object record or anything like that. But this is functionality that could make your life a little bit more easier. All right. So those are accession records. I'm now going to move over to show you two different types of resource records. So resource records, they're called resource records in the application, but you probably call them finding aids or catalog records, something like that. But they're resource records in the context of ArchivesSpace. And they're defined as materials that are in the custody of your repository and are being controlled according to archival principles. A resource record, again, it can be a whole collection or it can be a single item. Here it is a diary, so it's a single item. It's identified by an identifier or a title. And this is really where you're going to put the bulk of your information about the intellectual and physical characteristics of your materials. So within a resource record, you're going to add a range of elements. You're going to add your notes. You're going to add your write statements, dates, extents. They can be supplemented with things like linking those related accession records, linking digital objects. I'll show you where that can be done in just a second. Like if you digitize this diary, you could link the link to the digital object here. You could link related subject headings, agent records, things like that, really to build out and supplement your collection. This is also, where you can export out your finding aid in a variety of formats. So you can export it out, and you see here, you can export it out in EAD, you can export it out in MARC, you could generate a PDF so that you could share your finding aid outside of ArchivesSpace if you needed to. So this is a resource record. This is a single level or just a single level resource record. There's no hierarchy here. It is just describing that single diary. That's perfectly appropriate. And I'll just scroll slowly so that you can see the information that's included here. Lots of red asterisks, way more than you see in an accession record. But you have things like dates and extents. There's a finding a data section here. Again, lots of linked subjects, lots of linked agents, and then you have notes. And so we're all, again, very familiar with these note types, but you can include as many notes as you need. There's 26 note types, and then you can also repeat those note types as needed. And you can also do things like link external documents. So like if you had some sort of a link to some sort of relevant documentation outside of your ArchivesSpace implementation, you can link that there as well. And then, like I said, so here, this is the instance subrecord. This is where you say where that stuff lives. So here we know that this is the box one. The stuff is in box one is the top container, and we could find the location and understand where it is by clicking view and going out to that separate top container record. We're not going to do that here, but we know that this is a physical diary. It lives in a box somewhere in this library. But let's say that one day I also digitized this diary and I wanted to also add that instance. You could do that by adding a digital object instance. I'm going to show you digital objects in just a second, but just know that that's a way that, like, if you have this diary in multiple formats, you have the physical diary in a box, and maybe you also have the microfilm somewhere, and you also have the digital object, you could include all of those different instances of that material here instead of having to redescribe it over and over again. So it cuts down on duplicate description. All right. So again, it's a single or a top level resource record. Now I'm going to move over. I'm going to go back to the Krispy Kreme Corporation records. This is a resource record that it has a lot of hierarchy, right? So this is a finding aid that for an entire collection, and you can see within this top level, this top area, you can see where how that hierarchy is expressed. So if we scroll down, again, all that information for the collection is here. There's tons included here. Let's hop over. We've got 10 notes, 12 subjects. I had already opened up the subjects and notes in the other record, but just as like to like improve performance, anytime you have 5 or more of any record type, ArchivesSpace will collapse them by default. You just click them to open up again. So you see we have 12 related subjects. So just top level description of this record, but then you'll see there are many series within there. So if we wanted to, we could open that up, and here are the files within that series. Within this series, we actually have sub-series down really nested into the material as much as you need to. And then I say, oh, okay, oh, I made a mistake on this one. I need to go in and edit this. This is actually, there's an additional folder here or something. You click the specific record and it opens up that specific archival object record, which you could then go in and make the specific edits to this information. So you can build out your hierarchy as you need to. There are a few different ways that you can build out this hierarchy. One is to do it within ArchivesSpace. You could do that by adding siblings, adding children, building out your hierarchy, drag and drop whenever you need to, reorder it when you need to if you made a mistake, but just really like sort of manually do it within the application itself. More popular is to use the load via spreadsheet functionality, which is, again, one of those spreadsheet templates that I mentioned earlier. You just take the template, fill out the spreadsheet outside of the application, fill out all of that hierarchy for the entire collection, and then you import the entire thing in one go as a spreadsheet. That is very popular. And I would say most people try to use the spreadsheet functionality, especially for larger collections like this. Another option would be to use the rapid data entry tool. It is an in-application tool. This is what it looks like. It creates something similar to a spreadsheet for you to complete from within the application. This is useful if you just need to add 5 folders at the same level, and it's just a really quick way to do it without having to do the template and import the template and all of that. So there are many ways that you can get information into ArchivesSpace sort of in bulk and a little bit more quickly than doing it one at a time. So when you're working with a big collection like this, you may want to look at the different ways you can get that information into ArchivesSpace. All right. And then let's close out these records. Now we're gonna look at digital objects very briefly. If you can't tell, I had some of this stuff open earlier. All right, so this is a digital object record. I'll talk about it a little more in just a second. But before I say that, I just want to, big caveat, ArchivesSpace is not a digital asset management system. You cannot ingest or store digital materials into ArchivesSpace. ArchivesSpace supports the management of digital object metadata. It allows you to manage the description of your archival holdings within a single system. So the assumption is that the files themselves are going to be stored and managed somewhere else. So that might be like a network or web accessible location, like a file server. It might be a digital asset management system. It's something that's capable of managing and storing those files, and then those files are linked back in ArchivesSpace. So that's something to keep in mind. You cannot actually store files themselves in ArchivesSpace. From within ArchivesSpace, you can export your digital object files as METs, mods, or Dublin Core metadata. And you also can link your digital objects to related sessions and resource records and their component records. Like I mentioned earlier, like if you wanted to link a digitized copy of a diary to the diary that you've described as a resource record, you could do that as well. You're probably thinking this looks a lot like a resource record or an accession record, and it sure does. But there are different requirements here for a digital object record. Obviously, the biggest being the file version. So that is where you would, like I said, you're not storing your files within ArchivesSpace. You're just providing the link to where they live to ArchivesSpace. So that link be provided here as the file URI. The example that we're looking at now for a digital object record is what we call a simple digital object. So that's one single digital file being described here. In this example, it's just a photograph. So it's one single photograph being described, and there is one single digital file for that photograph. That's fairly simple to understand, but that it can be a little more complex than that. So I'm going to go back to the example that I used of a diary. So let's say you did want to digitize that diary, and it's a 100-page diary, and you have all 100 of those pages, and you consolidate them down to one PDF. Even though there are 100 pages represented within that PDF, because it is one digital file, you would be describing it as a simple digital object. So the digital object itself would be that single PDF that you would share here as a file version. And you would describe it, and it would be just a simple digital object. That's what we're looking at. One file described in a simple way here. Now, another way that you can describe your digital materials within ArchivesSpace would be to create complex digital objects. So using that diary as an example still, let's say you took all 100 of those pages, and instead of consolidating them to one PDF, you decided you wanted each individual JPEG to have its own individual file and to create, sort of re-represent that hierarchy of the diary within ArchivesSpace. You would do that by creating a complex digital object. So this is an example of a complex digital object. And again, it feels very similar to a resource record with hierarchy, right? Because you're creating that complex relationship for the digital materials in the same way you would for the resource records. So here, this is a series of photographs related to actually donut shops in North Carolina and Georgia. In theory, you could have taken all of those photographs and put them into one simple file where you can view all the photographs together. But instead, they're expressed as a complex digital object where they're described at the top level, and then each individual file has its own child record with the photograph, with the link. So going back to that diary example, here you would describe the diary at the top level, and then there would be 100 children with individual and different files or links taking you to those individual objects, and it would take you to each individual file. So again, digital objects are a lot. They're a lot to go over in any context, and they're a whole lot to go over in an hour. If you have questions about it, again, I would recommend going to the sandbox and using the ArchivesSpace sandbox to test things out. We also have several trainings on our YouTube channel around digital objects. I would defer to those and the information that you can get there because this is a lot of information to go over. The important things to keep in mind, again, are that ArchivesSpace is not a digital asset management system, so you're not storing files in ArchivesSpace, and that you can express files two different ways, either in that simple nature or the complex nature. Both are fine, both are right. ArchivesSpace supports both, but you do want to know, take some certain considerations in mind when you're doing that. For example, if you're going to want to link that diary back to the resource record, like we mentioned, it would be better to express it as a simple digital object because that's how you can link a digital object instance to a resource record. So if that's your main concern is linking material back to resource records, simple digital objects are your way to go. And then you can export them out with an EAD export in your resource record. However, if you're more interested in managing digital object metadata like METs, mods, and Dublin Core and exporting that out, then you may want to do complex digital objects. So it's really more specific to your use case, and it does take some thinking about your own needs before you start creating tons of digital objects in ArchivesSpace. All right, and then before I move back over into my slideshows, let's just go home. I am very briefly going to show you the ArchivesSpace public user interface. Public user interface is optional. You do not have to use it. It You can use other things. Some people use, like, they export their metadata and put it into other systems. Some people use another front end. Some people just link PDFs from their website. There's many different things that you can use instead of the public user interface, but it does exist within ArchivesSpace, and it is available for you to use. To get to the public user interface, you could either get there through the direct link, or if you are using it, you can get there from the staff user interface just by going down to the bottom and clicking View Public Interface. And this takes you to the ArchivesSpace public user interface. This is the default homepage. Again, like I said, you're going to want to change this, and you can customize it. You can get as complex in your customizations as you want, but you can customize things like you're going to want to change that logo to your own logo. You want to change the colors to be more reflective of your own. You can add, there are various plugins that the community has created to change the functionality in the public user interface. There's actually a public user interface training coming up on February 4th. So if you are interested in using the public user interface, that may be of interest. You can find that on the training section of our website. Information that is published to the public user interface, the public side, it is entirely up to you. There are publication checkboxes and publish all options all throughout the staff user interface. That's how you tell ArchivesSpace, yes, I want this information to go to the public user interface. Things do not automatically publish to the public user interface. You don't need to worry about that. I'm not going to spend a ton of time because I'm just looking at the clock going over the public user interface, but I did want to highlight that, again, very customizable. You do not automatically publish things to the public user interface. And you can use the search functionality. So a researcher can use the search functionality in much the same way that you can use it on the staff user interface, basic keyword search, or build out a complex search. Same functionality. The difference between a search in the public user interface and the staff user interface is that the public user interface searches across all repositories in your instance of ArchivesSpace. So if you're a staff member on the staff side searching and you have multiple repositories, you're only going to get results for the repository you're working in. Public user interface, it is all published material in all repositories. So that is something to keep in mind. And it's great, even if you're a staff member, to be able to hop over to the PUI and get a more holistic view of the collections in your entire implementation. You also can use these tabs at the top to browse. You can see we have two different repositories in this implementation, and they have different collections in each one. So if I'm planning a visit and I only have time to go to one location, I can narrow my search that way. You can see you can browse as well as do a search just for that specific repository. You also can just browse collections in general, just like on the staff side, you have the ability to facet your search as well as to do some search within. So you can do a keyword search as well as search by date within your results. You can browse things like your digital materials. You see here on the test instance, you can browse what's labeled as unprocessed materials. That means the session records. It's very common to hide this option. A lot of people don't want their session records to be publicly searchable, right? So you can hide that. You can hide that if you don't want that to be available. You can browse by subject. So if I'm coming in, I really am just very interested in one specific subject, I can browse or search for that subject and then see the related collections there. So you see there's one photo album in the Krispy Kreme corporate records. If there was more examples, you would see that. You can also search by name. So if I'm interested in a specific creator, I can find that. And then finally, classifications, which we did not have time to get into in this training. But there are many different ways that you can browse within the public user interface. Again, I highly recommend going to the sandbox and reviewing that way since we're running short on time, which we always do. So with that, I'm going to pop back over to our slides and talk a little bit more about membership to ArchivesSpace. I know I've talked a lot about the Help Center, but there are many benefits to membership to ArchivesSpace. So as I mentioned earlier, the application is free to download and use, but we do have a membership model to support the development of the application in our user community. Since ArchivesSpace members directly contribute to the sustainability of the application, they are entitled to certain benefits in addition to the ability to serve on the governance councils and provide input on the development of the application, like I mentioned earlier. So this is just a little background about current membership. We currently have over 500 ArchivesSpace member organizations. Membership is at the organizational level. All employees within an organization are entitled to all benefits, regardless of size or how much staff you have. And membership is distributed across 5 levels with corresponding fees. Membership levels range from our very small level, which has a $300 annual fee, to very large, which is a $7,500 membership fee. And I'll mention that over half of our members are either small or very small organizations. Membership levels are intended to reflect organizational size and capacity, and all members are entitled to the same benefit regardless of the size of your membership level. You get all the same benefits. In addition to these member levels, we also have other types of membership and affiliations for organizations working with ArchivesSpace outside of normal archival work. We have a free educational program membership for educators using ArchivesSpace in the classroom, as an example. We also have a consortia provider program for consortium supporting organizations that use ArchivesSpace. So if you're attending today and you're thinking, well, this general membership doesn't quite work for me, there still be a way for you to participate in our community. I'm also going to be providing a series of links at the end of the presentation with all this information in. So what does ArchivesSpace membership include? I keep talking about it. So ArchivesSpace member benefits include access to that help center, which does include our user manual. It includes our user tutorial videos and recordings of past trainings. So if you miss a live training, you can always watch the recording. You also receive discounts on our live trainings if you're a member. You also receive technical support for the application. So if you need help installing the application, upgrading the application, anything like that, or if you just discover an error or an issue, we can create a technical support ticket for you. You also get access to member-only events and programs like the ArchivesSpace member forums that we hold in person and virtually each year. You can also participate in the ArchivesSpace member match program. It's a peer-to-peer support program, so there's a lot of great stuff that we make available to our members. You also get access to member-only listservs. This is where our members communicate with one another and we broadcast important news and announcements. And of course, you get the ability to collaborate with archivists around the world and to guide the development of an application and a member community that serves archivists around the world. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and move things over to the Q&A. But these are some great resources that can help you if you're exploring ArchivesSpace. That Getting Started page is where I would get started. You can access the sandbox from there, as well as some other resources to sort of inform you about ArchivesSpace itself. You can learn more about our membership fees and level on the website as well. And if you're ready to go and you're ready for membership and you're ready to take this to your director or whoever at your organization, we have some resources to help you make that case for ArchivesSpace membership there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and stop talking and take a sip of water. And if anyone would like to drop a question into the Q&A, I would be happy to answer them. Yeah, okay, so first question, Ken has asked, have we done many migrations with Axial Com? So I will say that ArchivesSpace, we do not perform data migrations, but we do have members in the community who have migrated from Axial Com. So I would say that it is possible. It sort of depends on how you can export your data out of COM and the data format that you're getting out of COM and how much you need to massage that data to get it into ArchivesSpace. So I'd love to have that conversation with you if you want to send us an email. Specifically, I'd be interested to know, coming out of COM, what can you export out and what sort of data do you already have in there? And we can talk about like migration options for you. But again, all that being said, the ArchivesSpace program doesn't perform the migrations ourselves. We can provide you with tools and resources. We also have a consultants list for people who do that sort of work, but it is possible. Any other questions? They're none popping up in the chat, but or in the Q&A. Happy to answer them. Right. So Patricia asks, does ArchivesSpace support home versus temporary locations and identifying boxes with barcodes? So yes, you can mark a location within ArchivesSpace as temporary. And I know that people make use of that functionality when they're having to do something like a move, or if they're having to take something offsite for a short period of time. It is a little more manual, like you can't set like an expiration date for it. But it is possible to designate a location as temporary, and then you have another location that's your permanent location. And then you can identify your materials with barcodes. So you can on your what we call a top container within ArchivesSpace, but like your box or whatever, your folder, whatever that top level of containment is, you can include a barcode for that. It is not a circulation management system, though. I will say that. So if you're looking for something to like help with circulation in your reading room or some sort of functionality like that, it doesn't. It's not. It's not really great for that and tracking that, but you can include your barcodes and your locations within the application like you're describing. Not seeing any other questions in the Q&A, but I do want to make sure that I leave enough time and sit silently long enough so if people are typing furiously that they can get their question. But I also don't want to keep us here all day. So if no question has popped up by the time I'm done talking, we will go ahead and wrap things up. But thank you everyone for joining me today for this demo. Again, if you have any questions at all, please do contact us at archivespacehome@lyrasis.org. We'd be happy to talk with you. And if there's any other information that we can provide, we'd be happy to provide it. So thank you all. Have a great day.